So picture the most unforgiving landscape imaginable. You are standing right in the dead center of this desolate, completely frozen mountain pass.
Right, an absolutely brutal environment.
Exactly. The wind is howling at gale force. The ambient temperature is like 40 degrees below zero. And the jagged, ice-covered peaks around you have basically rejected human habitation for centuries.
Yeah, you would not survive out there for more than a few minutes.
No, absolutely not. But suddenly, cutting through this brutal, ancient environment is this sleek, silent marvel of human engineering, the Kronos 9.
And, I mean, calling it a train really does not do it justice.
It really doesn't. It is a state-of-the-art, hyper-luxury maglev roaring across the ice at a blistering 500 kilometers per hour.
Which is just an insane speed for land travel.
Right, because by utilizing superconducting magnets to completely eliminate track friction, it's practically a low-altitude spacecraft gliding on this invisible magnetic cushion.
Yeah, a bullet hovering over the ice.
And inside, it is the absolute pinnacle of opulence. It's designed to make its passengers completely forget the deadly environment that is just, mere inches away.
Which is a really important psychological detail for this deep dive.
Exactly. Because right in the center of it all, inside the VIP observation car, which features this entirely glass-domed ceiling and custom-built, hermetically sealed internal glass walls, sits a billionaire tech investor named Vance Sterling.
And he's totally alone in there, right?
Completely alone. He is sitting in his private, climate-controlled sanctuary.
You know, the visual contrast there is really vital to understanding the psychology of what we're about to discuss today.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you have the ultimate picture of untouchable wealth and security. I mean, here's a man encased in armored glass, hovering above the earth, moving way faster than a commercial helicopter.
She's completely insulated from the harsh, freezing vacuum of the world outside.
Exactly. He has basically bought his way out of the elements.
But that insulation is exactly what makes the file sitting in front of us so deeply unsettling. Because today, for you listening, we aren't just doing an engineering showcase on a marvel of modern transportation.
No, not at all.
We are broadcasting a high-stakes investigative bulletin. We have a massive stack of sources to get through today, a classified incident report, highly technical forensic engineering data, and a really dark historical file that goes back nearly a decade.
And the goal here is incredibly specific.
And honestly, a bit terrifying. Our mission for this deep dive is to deconstruct a meticulously engineered, physically impossible crime.
Yeah, an impossible crime is the perfect way to phrase it.
Together, you and I are going to unpack how a billionaire was assassinated in plain sight in a locked room using absolutely nothing but the unforgiving laws of physics.
So for everyone listening, you basically need to throw out everything you think you know about how a crime is committed.
Right, we're not looking for conventional weapons here.
No, there are no ballistics to analyze, no poisons injected into a drink, no blunt force trauma. When you strip away the luxury of the Kronos 9, what you are looking at is a weaponized environment.
A weaponized environment. I love how you put that.
It's true. The level of aerodynamic mastery and sheer structural manipulation detailed in these forensic reports, I mean, it literally reads like a doctoral thesis in fluid dynamics.
It really does. And so if you appreciate a mystery that requires both heavy-duty mechanical engineering and deep psychological profiling to solve, you are in for an unforgettable ride.
It is a massive puzzle.
It is. We aren't looking for a smoking gun. We are looking at empty space, atmospheric pressure, and an obsession that spans decades.
But to even begin to understand the why, we first have to try and comprehend the how.
Exactly. And to do that, we need to trace the 20-second anomaly second by agonizing second. Let's look at the timeline.
Yeah, the timeline documented in the train's internal logs is where this incident crosses the line from a standard fatality into an event that fundamentally defies basic human biology.
Because the Kronos 9 is cruising at its top speed of 500 kilometers per hour, it approaches the base of a massive mountain range and enters a dark, miles-long tunnel cut straight through the solid granite.
Right, and Vance Sterling is sitting comfortably, completely alone in his glass-walled VIP section.
The internal cameras show he has a luxury champagne bottle on the table in front of him and a crystal glass of water resting right next to his hand.
He is perfectly fine, completely relaxed.
The train enters the tunnel, darkness swallows the glass dome, and then, according to the power grid logs, the overhead lights in his specific car flicker.
Just a flicker. They don't fail completely.
Right. The primary generators never drop. The LED arrays just pulse and flicker for exactly 20 seconds.
Which is nothing. Just count to 20 in your head right now. It is the time it takes to tie your shoe. It's a rounding error in a daily schedule.
But when the Kronos 9 clears that mountain tunnel and bursts back into the glaring, blinding daylight of the frozen pass, the microclimate inside that sealed glass room has catastrophically shifted.
In just 20 seconds.
Vance Sterling is still sitting upright in his plush leather seat, but he is no longer a living, breathing human being.
It's horrifying to even picture.
I am looking at the medical examiner's preliminary photos right now, and the description, shriveled, mummified husk, almost feels like an understatement.
The forensic pathology data is staggering to read. I mean, every single ounce of moisture, water, and biological fluid has been violently extracted from his flesh and internal organs.
In 20 seconds, we are talking about the complete and instantaneous desiccation of a 180-pound adult male.
Which should be impossible.
Okay, yes, let's unpack this immediately because my brain is throwing up massive red flags. A mummy in 20 seconds. I'm sorry, you can't just evaporate 40 liters of water in the time it takes to send a text message without triggering a localized nuclear reaction.
The math simply does not work under normal conditions.
Mummification is a process of desiccation that takes months of chemical treatment with natron salts in ancient Egypt, or, bodies left in the dry, freezing winds of the Atacama Desert for hundreds of years.
No.
The human body is roughly 60% water. You don't just dry out instantly. Where did all that mass go?
And that thermodynamic impossibility was the first massive hurdle for the investigative team. Because under standard atmospheric conditions, to extract that volume of water that rapidly, you would need to introduce a staggering, unimaginable amount of heat.
Like flash boiling the fluids.
Yes. We are talking about temperatures that would essentially incinerate the body, melt the leather chair, and turn the cabin into a blast furnace.
And this is the crazy part, the first responders noted an impossible contradiction when they breached the room.
Right, the suit.
Vance's custom-tailored wool suit was completely immaculately intact. It was a bone dry, sure, but it wasn't singed, it wasn't burned, the leather of the seat wasn't melted at all.
And the detail that completely shatters the heat hypothesis, which we have to talk about, are the drinks.
Oh my gosh, the drinks. The luxury champagne bottle sitting on the table in front of him is completely full and chilled.
Still perfectly chilled.
And the glass of water resting right next to his hand, literally inches away from a body that was just flash desiccated, hasn't dropped a single millimeter in volume.
Which is the biggest clue.
If you introduce enough heat to boil a man alive in 20 seconds, that glass of water should have violently boiled away into steam, and the sudden thermal shock should have shattered the crystal glass into powder.
But it didn't. The survival of the water glass points to a chilling, almost surgical level of precision.
Surgical is the word.
Because if a massive heat flash occurred, the entire ambient environment of the room would have spiked. Or, if a chemical desiccating agent had been pumped through the air vents, say, a weaponized industrial silica, there would be a massive residue covering the walls, the floor, the champagne bottle.
And the air would be totally unbreathable for the investigators.
Exactly. But the environmental sensors showed the air was perfectly clean. The temperature was a comfortable 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The data proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the killer somehow manipulated the physical space around Vance Sterling's body and only his body.
I'm trying to visualize this. It is like the laws of thermodynamics were simply rewritten for a three-dimensional space no larger than a living room chair.
It is incredibly localized.
Like a sniper rifle, but instead of a high-caliber bullet, the weapon was instantaneous dehydration. But if we've ruled out heat and we've ruled out chemicals, what force in the universe is left to extract water?
Pressure, or more specifically, the violent, instantaneous absence of it.
A vacuum.
Yes. But to prove that hypothesis, the investigators had to figure out how someone isolates an environmental pressure drop to a 3-foot radius inside a sealed train car.
Because normally if you blow a hole in a pressurized cabin, the whole room equalizes, right? The whole thing depressurizes.
Exactly. To understand how that water glass survived while the man sitting next to it didn't, we had to rely on the only people who actually watched the anomaly unfold.
And that locked room aspect is what makes the witness testimonies in this file so crucial, because Vance wasn't completely unobserved. He was in a glass cage, and people were looking directly at him.
The architectural layout of the Kronos 9 observation car plays a huge role here.
Break that down for us.
Well, Vance was in the central VIP section, enclosed by those custom, soundproofed internal glass walls. But directly adjacent to his section, wrapping around the glass, was a high-end passenger lounge.
Right.
And occupying that lounge during the transit were 3 international tech developers.
And these aren't just, random distracted tourists scrolling on their phones. These are highly educated observers.
Yeah, they were looking directly through the glass partition at Vance when the train hit the darkness of the tunnel.
And their statements to the authorities perfectly align, which is a rare gift in any forensic investigation. They all independently confirmed the locked room status of the event.
The heavy, sealed glass door to Vance's section was closed, engaged, and digitally locked.
The internal security logs back this up entirely. Nobody opened it. Nobody walked up to the glass to deploy a device. Nobody tampered with the external door panel.
For those 20 seconds in the dark tunnel, Vance was absolutely, undeniably alone in that sealed cube.
Now, the flickering lights mean they couldn't see perfectly, but they saw enough. And one of the witnesses, and this is the detail that gave me actual goosebumps, was a precision engineer.
Which is just incredible luck for the investigators.
Of all the people to be sitting in the adjacent car, staring through the glass, you have a professional whose entire career is predicated on observing microscopic physical anomalies, structural tolerances, and fluid dynamics.
The inclusion of a precision engineer's testimony elevates the reliability of the incident report tenfold, because an engineer's brain is highly calibrated to notice when physical objects in the real world behave contrary to established mechanical laws.
Right.
So while the other 2 tech developers were understandably disoriented by the flickering lights and the sudden tunnel darkness, the engineer's eyes locked onto a highly specific, bizarre visual clue during those 20 seconds.
The fountain pen.
Yes, a heavy, luxury, gold-plated fountain pen resting on the polished table directly in front of Vance.
I am reading the transcript of his interview right here. He notes the pen didn't just roll off the table due to the train's vibration. It didn't bounce.
No, it lifted.
The pen lifted vertically into the air. It hovered, literally floated in midair for exactly 5 seconds.
Just suspended there.
And then, while it was suspended, the ink inside the pen violently exploded outward, creating a localized, dark, misty cloud of aerosolized ink in the air before the empty metal casing of the pen dropped back down to the table. I mean, did gravity just turn off for 5 seconds?
Gravity didn't turn off.
Yeah.
Atmospheric pressure completely bottomed out, creating a massive, localized updraft.
A vacuum updraft.
Exactly. A heavy metal object floating in a room implies a vacuum so powerful and so highly concentrated that the sheer force of the air rushing upward to fill a void temporarily overcame the gravitational pull in the pen.
That invisible microscopic tornado idea is wild.
Yeah.
But the exploding ink is the part that I really cannot wrap my head around. I get why the pen might get sucked upward, but why would the liquid ink inside it suddenly detonate into a mist?
Okay, to understand the exploding ink, we have to talk about Boyle's law and the relationship between pressure and boiling points.
Let's get into the thermodynamics.
This is fundamental thermodynamics. Most people assume water, or liquid ink, boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius.
Right, that's what we learned in high school.
But that is only true at standard sea level atmospheric pressure. The atmosphere around us is incredibly heavy. It is constantly pushing down on the surface of liquids, keeping the molecules packed together.
Oh, I see. Think about the last time you heard about climbers on Mount Everest. Because the air pressure is so much lower at that altitude, there's less weight pushing down on the water.
Exactly.
So water boils on Everest at around 160 degrees Fahrenheit instead of 212. You need much less heat to make it vaporize because the pressure is lower.
Now take that Everest principle and scale it to an absolute extreme. What happens if you drop the atmospheric pressure not just to the level of mountain peak, but to near zero?
Like out in space?
Yes. What happens in a hard vacuum? The boiling point of a liquid drops so drastically that it falls below room temperature.
Oh, wow.
When you create an instant near-total vacuum, liquids don't just slowly evaporate over time, they boil instantly, violently, without any heat being applied at all.
So the liquid ink inside that heavy gold pen was suddenly exposed to an environmental pressure so incredibly low that it violently converted into a gas.
It expanded instantly, vaporizing and blowing out of the pen casing in a mist.
Wait, if the pen experienced an instantaneous near-total vacuum, that means Vance Sterling experienced an instantaneous near-total vacuum.
You're putting the pieces together now.
His body is 60% water. If the pressure in his immediate physical space dropped to near zero, the water inside his blood plasma, his internal organs, his skin, it wouldn't just sweat out.
No, it would undergo a phase change.
It would instantly boil at his own normal body temperature. It would vaporize into gas, that is the mummification. The water wasn't baked out of him by heat, it was violently, explosively sucked out of him as a rapidly expanding gas.
The medical term for this phenomenon is ebulism. It is the spontaneous formation of gas bubbles in bodily fluids due to significantly reduced environmental pressure.
Have we ever seen this before?
We have seen this historically in catastrophic spacesuit testing failures in vacuum chambers, like the famous Jim LeBlanc incident at NASA in 1965, where he reported feeling the saliva boiling on his tongue before losing consciousness.
That is terrifying.
But in those tests, the repressurization happens quickly enough to save the person. Vance was subjected to it for a sustained 20 seconds.
Oh, man.
The sheer volume of expanding gas ripped the moisture through his skin pores, leaving behind a completely desiccated husk.
But the precision, I keep coming back to the water glass. The pen floated and exploded. Vance suffered catastrophic ebulism, but the glass of water just inches away on the table was completely untouched.
The champagne was fine.
The killer didn't target the room. They didn't suck all the air out of the VIP car. They targeted the exact three-dimensional spatial coordinates of Vance's body.
And that is the crux of the locked room mystery. How do you isolate a deadly vacuum to a space no larger than a man's torso?
You can't just smuggle a giant industrial vacuum pump past Maglev security, plug it in, and hide it under the seat.
You really can't.
And even if you manage to build a pump that small, a battery-operated motor wouldn't have the horsepower to pull a hard vacuum that fast in 20 seconds against the ambient pressure of the rest of the train car. The mechanics of it are impossible.
The investigators hit that exact same wall. They scoured the train's electrical schematics, looking for massive power draws that could indicate a hidden pump. They found nothing.
Zero evidence of a device.
And that realization forced a massive paradigm shift in the investigation. They realized they were looking for a weapon that wasn't there, because the weapon wasn't brought onto the train in a suitcase.
Right. The weapon was the train.
Let's transition to the forensic engineering data, specifically the section labeled the aerodynamic guillotine.
This is where the narrative shifts from a bizarre physiological anomaly into a display of terrifying technical mastery.
Yes. To understand the murder weapon, we need to talk about the extreme fluid dynamics of what actually happens when a maglev train, which is essentially a 500 km/h bullet, enters a narrow mountain tunnel.
I know a little bit about tunnel engineering. When a high-speed train goes into a tight tunnel, it acts exactly like a piston pushing into a syringe. It pushes a massive compressed wall of air in front of it because the air has nowhere else to go.
The piston effect is a major challenge for high-speed rail. Yes.
Yeah.
It's why older Japanese Shinkansen trains used to create a literal sonic boom when exiting tunnels. They were pushing a shock wave of compressed air out the other side.
But the piston effect happens at the front of the train, right?
Exactly. The other side of that aerodynamic equation is what happens outside the train's hull, along the sides, particularly in the micro gaps between the smooth train exterior and the jagged tunnel walls.
Because the clearance in those mountain tunnels is incredibly tight to save on boring costs.
Right. Because the train is moving so incredibly fast and taking up so much space in the tunnel, the ambient air in the tunnel has to squeeze past the train's exterior to get out of the way.
It's displacing all that air.
This accelerates the air rushing past the hull to massive, violent speeds. And this brings us to Bernoulli's principle.
The principle of fluid dynamics. As the speed of a fluid, or in this case a gas-like air, increases, its static pressure exponentially decreases.
Yes.
It is how airplane wings generate lift. The air moves faster over the curved top of the wing, creating low pressure, and the higher pressure underneath pushes the plane up.
Apply Bernoulli's principle to a 500 km/h maglev train inside a confined rock tube. Wrapping around the outside of this luxury bullet train is a massive, violent slipstream of incredibly fast-moving air.
Just tearing along the outside.
In the tight confines of a narrow mountain tunnel, that accelerated air creates what engineers call a micropressure wave.
A micropressure wave.
For brief, intense moments, highly localized pockets of near-absolute vacuum are formed right along the exterior hull of the train. It is a violently turbulent, invisible aerodynamic force tearing along the outside of the glass.
I am picturing this invisible, swirling vortex of negative pressure just scraping against the outside of the train. But the Kronos 9 is specifically designed to be perfectly sealed against this.
It's an aerospace-grade fuselage.
Right. It's built precisely to keep the passengers safe and comfortable from those exact external pressure waves. So how did the killer get that exterior vacuum to bypass the hull and reach Vance inside the VIP car?
The engineering report details a microscopic, nearly undetectable alteration to the train's subfloor infrastructure.
Under the floorboards.
Directly beneath Vance's custom seating booth, hidden entirely from view under the floor panels, is an emergency ventilation safety valve. It's an industrial pressure release mechanism meant to equalize cabin pressure slowly in the event of an HVAC system failure. The killer bypassed the digital security protocols and subtly replaced the heavy-duty structural sealant around this specific mechanical floor valve with a highly sterilized, fast-dissolving chemical compound.
A fast-dissolving compound, like a delayed fuse.
Exactly like that.
So it was a ticking time bomb, but instead of being triggered by a digital clock, it was triggered by the physical environment.
Think about the material science required here. The killer used a polymer designed to degrade under specific shear stress and the distinct acoustic vibration frequencies that only occur when a maglev hits 500 kilometers per hour inside the specific rock density of that mountain tunnel.
That is insane.
Over the course of the journey, normal vibrations and standard altitude pressure changes weakened this temporary sealant. The timing was calculated with staggering, almost clairvoyant precision.
So right as the train enters the tunnel?
Right as the Kronos 9 hit the mountain tunnel, right as that massive, violent micropressure vacuum wave formed outside the hull, the weakened sealant completely gave way.
The valve failed. So for exactly 20 seconds, the exact precise time it took for the train to transit the length of the tunnel, that floor valve blew wide open.
Yes.
It created a direct, unshielded physical conduit between the pressurized cabin and the violent vacuum slipping along the exterior hull.
It functioned like a massive industrial straw. The immense negative pressure from the 500 km per hour slipstream ripped through that tiny, newly opened valve.
And just sucked the air out?
It created a highly focused, localized vacuum effect, pulling furiously straight down to the floor vents under Vance's chair.
But hold on, let me push back on this. If you blow a hole in the floor of an airplane or a train, the entire room depressurizes. The air rushes toward the breach.
That's usually what happens, yes.
Why was it only Vance who was targeted? Why didn't that floor valve just suck the air out of the whole VIP lounge, knock over the champagne bottle, and depressurize the adjacent passenger car, causing the witnesses to black out?
This is the genius of the trap. This is where the killer used Vance's own exorbitant luxury against him. It's the final, fatal puzzle piece that isolates the vacuum.
Okay, what is it?
Vance wasn't just sitting in a standard train seat. He had demanded a custom-built, high-tech luxury chair that utilized a specialized active suction cooling fabric.
Active suction cooling? Are we talking about something like those ventilated car seats that pull air away from your back so you don't sweat on a long drive?
Fundamentally similar, but engineered on a billionaire scale.
Oh, wow.
The entire surface of his massive leather chair was a complex matrix of microscopic pores connected to internal ducting, designed to gently, constantly pull ambient air and body heat away from his skin to maintain a perfect resting temperature.
So it's already designed to pull air in.
Right. And the floor valve that the killer tampered with didn't just open into the open air of the room. It was directly, physically plumbed into the ventilation intake of Vance's specific chair.
Oh my God. The killer basically turned the underside of Vance's chair into a weaponized industrial vacuum cleaner, powered completely by the train's own breakneck speed.
Precisely.
The vacuum didn't disperse wildly into the room. It pulled through the ducting of the chair itself.
It was a perfectly contained, perfectly isolated suction cone. The sudden, immense, negative atmospheric pressure rushing through the broken floor valve pulled the air and subsequently the moisture directly through his clothes and skin from the bottom up.
Just ripping the water right out of his cells.
His body's water content instantly underwent ebullition, vaporized into gas, and was violently sucked down through the cooling pores of the chair, pulled through the open floor valve, and exhausted entirely into the train's underbelly slipstream.
And because the suction was limited entirely to the physical footprint of the chair's internal cooling matrix, anything outside of that exact specific seating area was completely unaffected.
Untouched.
That is why the pen, which the witness noted was hovering right on the edge of the table directly over his lap, got caught in the outer edge of the updraft, depressurized and exploded.
Yes.
But the crystal glass of water, sitting just a few inches further away on the solid, unventilated part of the table, was outside the microscopic radius of the localized suction cone.
Yeah.
It's literally an aerodynamic guillotine.
A guillotine constructed entirely of moving air. It represents a terrifying mastery of aerodynamics, structural engineering, and fluid dynamics.
Flawless.
Think about the utter lack of traditional evidence. They didn't pull a trigger, they didn't swing a blade, they didn't mix a poison, they simply removed a microscopic barrier and let the immutable laws of physics do the work.
The train's immense speed, the tunnel's narrow clearance, the active suction share, every single element was a necessary interlocking gear in this invisible, lethal machine.
It is deeply sophisticated.
The sheer intellect required to pull this off is staggering. I mean, you would need to know the exact top speed of the train down to the decimal.
You would.
You would need the aerodynamic drag profile of the tunnel walls. You would have to calculate the dissolution rate of the sealant polymer against the vibration of the tracks. You would have to measure the porosity of the chair fabric to ensure it could handle the CFM flow rate of the vacuum without tearing.
It's a staggering amount of math.
It is not just a murder, it is a masterclass in physics. Who on earth could calculate something so complex?
Well, to find a mind capable of this level of bespoke engineering, the investigators had to stop looking at the train and start looking backward into the victim's life.
We have to look at the motive.
Yes. They had to move from the physical mechanism of the weapon to the motive. And what they uncovered in Vance Sterling's sealed corporate files was a dark history that perfectly, sickeningly mirrors this exact, highly specific method of death.
I am opening the historical file right now, and we have to rewind the clock almost a decade. 6 years before the Kronos 9 even existed on a blueprint, Vance Sterling was the primary financier of a highly experimental aerospace laboratory.
Right.
They were developing high-altitude, next-generation travel technologies. One of their major flagship projects was a state-of-the-art vacuum-sealed, high-altitude passenger capsule.
The clinical psychology of the killer begins here. Vance Sterling was a notoriously ruthless investor. He didn't care about the science, he cared about the quarterly returns.
Like so many venture capitalists.
Right. When he saw the vacuum capsule project inevitably going over budget and missing its aggressive deadlines, he simply pulled the plug.
He callously cut the funding overnight, demanding immediate high-pressure results or threatening to shut the entire lab down and blackball the scientists.
Which put an impossible crushing pressure on his lead aerospace scientist, a woman named Dr. Alina Cross.
And to save her life's work, and to appease Sterling's brutal demands, she was forced to conduct a highly dangerous experimental pressure test entirely alone late at night.
Without the proper safety protocols, backup systems, or support staff that the stripped funding would have provided.
And the result was tragically mathematically predictable. During the extreme stress test, a catastrophic seal failure occurred in the main chamber.
The capsule instantly and violently depressurized while Dr. Cross was inside.
She was exposed to a hard vacuum. She died instantly, suffering the exact same explosive ebulism, mummified in the exact same manner as Vance Sterling was on the train.
It is horrific.
To experience that instantaneous vaporization of your own blood, the sudden extraction of all moisture, it is a terrible way to die.
But the detail in the corporate cover-up file that really makes your stomach drop. She wasn't entirely alone in the facility that night.
No, her young son was there. He was sitting in the observation room while she worked late.
He saw it.
And because the experimental capsule was designed for visual stress testing, he watched his mother die an agonizing, physically impossible death directly through the reinforced glass of the chamber.
Just try to imagine that. A young boy sitting in a dark lab watching his mother get mummified behind a thick pane of glass.
I can't even begin to comprehend the psychological shatter that would cause to a developing brain. The trauma must have been absolute.
If you look at the forensic psychiatry of severe trauma, especially trauma experienced in a critical developmental stage, it rarely just fades away with time.
No, it festers.
Without massive intervention, it metastasizes. The raw trauma of witnessing his mother's agonizing death birthed an absolute all-consuming obsession.
It arrested his development.
The clinical reality of this kind of PTSD is that it channels all their cognitive energy into a compulsive revenge loop. This wasn't just about killing Vance Sterling. Shooting him would have been easy. This was about making Vance understand.
It completely reframes the entire investigation. It is not just a hit. It is a mirrored execution. Look at the terrifying physical parallels.
They are perfectly aligned.
The young boy watched his mother die an agonizing death behind the glass of the vacuum capsule. So he ensures Vance Sterling dies an agonizing death behind the custom-built glass walls of the VIP observation car.
He wanted Vance to be totally isolated.
Behind glass, destroyed by the exact same physical forces of vacuum and pressure. It is poetic justice written in atmospheric pressure.
It is the ultimate expression of grief, weaponized into high-level engineering. He didn't want to shoot Vance or poison his champagne.
That would be far too quick, far too disconnected from the original sin of the lab.
Exactly. He needed to perfectly, meticulously recreate the exact thermodynamic environment of his mother's death. He needed Vance to feel the exact same horrifying sensation of the air and the life-giving moisture being violently pulled from his body.
I understand the poetry of the revenge, but the timeline is what truly terrifies me. I mean, why wait 6 years? If you are that consumed by grief and hatred, why not just tamper with the brakes on Vance's car? Why not hire a professional?
It takes an incredible amount of self-control.
The level of restraint here, the sheer ability to delay gratification, is staggering.
That restraint is what bridges us into the most chilling realization of the entire investigative report. It reveals the sheer mind-bending scale of the son's long game.
It really is a long game.
Because he didn't just wait 6 years brooding in a basement, plotting a crude assassination. He used those 6 years to transform himself into the one thing, the only person, who could execute this flawless, invisible plan.
He became the architect of the Kronos 9.
Yes, that traumatized young boy dedicated every waking second of his life, every ounce of his intellect, to studying fluid dynamics, aerodynamics, and structural engineering.
He became a prodigy.
He became an undisputed prodigy in the field. He climbed the corporate ladder of the aerospace and transit industries with a singular, unblinking sociopathic focus.
He infiltrated the very high-speed transit industry that Vance Sterling dominated.
He worked his way into Sterling's inner circle, earned his trust, and ultimately, he secured the massive, multi-billion-dollar government contract to design the aerodynamics of the Kronos 9 Maglev train.
He literally guided a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure project just to construct a trap for one guy.
Well, that sink in.
It is like manipulating the government into building an entire city from scratch, just so you can rig one specific traffic light to cause a specific accident at a specific time. The patience. The terrifying patience required to sit in board meetings with the man who killed your mother, smiling, shaking his hand, while secretly drafting the blueprints for his execution.
As the chief aerodynamic designer, he didn't just tamper with an existing train, he designed the entire train's ventilation matrix, the subfloor valving, the aerodynamic profile of the hull, all of it for one singular overarching purpose.
He built a murder weapon and called it a train.
The Kronos 9 wasn't a normal train that was later turned into a weapon. It was fundamentally built from the very first CAD drawing as a custom murder weapon for Vance Sterling. He just brilliantly disguised it as a public luxury transit system.
Every single piece of that train was a mechanism in Vance's execution. He designed those specific emergency floor valves, knowing he would one day weaken the sealant. He personally recommended those active suction cooling chairs for the VIP section, pitching them as the height of luxury. He routed the massive ventilation ducts exactly beneath that specific chair.
It was a trap decades in the making.
He built a 500-kilometer-per-hour bullet specifically to turn a mountain tunnel into his mother's vengeful capsule. It is a masterpiece of hatred.
It is the ultimate weaponization of environment. And what's truly unsettling is that it highlights a terrifying systemic vulnerability in our modern world.
What do you mean?
Well, we surround ourselves every single day with complex high-energy systems. We fly in pressurized cabins at 35,000 feet. We ride in high-speed transit. We work in climate-controlled skyscrapers with massive HVAC systems.
We take it all for granted.
And we implicitly trust that the engineers who design them are stable and have our best interests at heart. This architect proved that if someone understands the math better than you do, they can turn the very air you breathe, the very seat you sit in, into an untraceable, lethal weapon.
The physical trap has sprung. The architect has achieved his impossible, mathematically perfect revenge.
He did.
But the investigative report sitting in front of me contains one final, deeply unsettling addendum. And honestly, this is the part of the file that made me want to look over my shoulder in the studio today.
You were looking at the firmware frequency report.
Yes. The cybersecurity division found something hidden in the train's code. Before the Kronos 9 came to a complete halt at the next station, and before the authorities could lock down the internal servers, they discovered a hidden piece of firmware.
It was buried deep in the system.
It had been covertly uploaded to the passenger entertainment network on the train.
The architect wasn't content with just the physical, thermodynamic execution of Vance Sterling. He wanted to leave a psychological signature, a message for anyone who tried to unravel his masterpiece.
And the firmware wasn't a standard computer virus meant to delete data or scramble the cameras. It was an audio file, a sound frequency wave.
Specifically an infrasonic, very low-frequency hum.
And the investigation notes state that this hum was designed to be seamlessly embedded into the background audio of the media the passengers were consuming.
Which is deeply creepy.
Even more unsettling, the forensic file notes that the digital structural data for this specific frequency was embedded into the background audio of the very investigative sources we are reviewing right now to build this episode.
Let's break down the basic physics of what that actually means.
Please do.
Sound is not just something you hear. It is, at its core, a mechanical wave of pressure moving through a physical medium, like the air in a room.
Right, sound waves push the air.
When you listen to audio, especially through highly sealed, closed-back headphones, the speaker transducers, the drivers inside the ear cups are physically pushing and pulling the air inside that tiny sealed space around your ear.
They are creating rapid, microscopic changes in local air pressure.
Yes, exactly.
And the report says the architect's specific low-frequency hum is calibrated to subtly alter the micro air pressure inside closed headphones. It operates around 18 or 19 hertz, just on the edge of human hearing, specifically to test the listener's eardrum resonance.
By uploading this to the network, the architect was engaging in a highly sophisticated form of psychological warfare. He didn't just want people to read a sterile police report about the vacuum that killed Vance.
He wanted them to feel it.
He wanted the passengers, and apparently the investigators, the journalists, anyone studying the case, to physically, viscerally feel the physics of the vacuum creeping in.
It's an immersive threat.
He used digital sound waves to physically manipulate air pressure against the eardrum, blurring the line between a digital audio file and a physical environmental reality.
Wait, as I am reading this forensic note out loud and thinking about the physics you just explained, I am actually noticing something in the studio.
What is it?
My ears are popping. It is faint, but it is undeniable. The air in this room suddenly feels incredibly thin.
That is the psychological brilliance of his design. You read about a localized vacuum, you learn the mechanics of how sound manipulates pressure, and suddenly your brain, or perhaps the audio file itself, is making you experience the physiological onset of depressurization.
It triggers a primal anxiety.
It absolutely does.
Think about your own environment right now. You listening to this deep dive if you're wearing headphones. Take a second and focus. Are you feeling it? Is there a slight, heavy pressure pushing against your eardrums?
Is the audio file calibrating to the acoustic seal of your specific headphones?
The investigative report actually ends with a literal warning for the forensic analysts reviewing the data. It says in bold print, "Swallow hard and swallow now. The vacuum is closing in."
It forces a physical, biological reaction. It makes the listener a passive participant in the exact same physical forces that constituted the crime. It is a haunting reminder of the weapon.
Okay, I actually need to take a breath. I am stepping back from the firmware threat. Let's just ground ourselves back in the room, away from the math and the pressure waves.
Good idea.
This investigative bulletin, it is just staggering to process. We set out to deconstruct an impossible crime, and what we found was a mind that could weaponize empty space out of pure, unadulterated grief.
The psychology is just as intense as the physics.
A kid who watched his mother die behind glass and spent decades meticulously designing and building a multi-billion-dollar high-speed train just to recreate that exact glass tomb for the man responsible.
It is a dark, undeniable testament to human ingenuity. The sheer brilliance of using a high-speed micropressure wave combined with an active suction luxury seat to create an invisible aerodynamic guillotine. It's mathematically flawless.
It really is.
It is a perfect mechanism.
Yeah.
And because it is so perfect, it is morally terrifying.
It really is. It makes you look at the entire built environment differently. Which brings us to the end of this deep dive. But before we sign off, I know you have a final thought you want to leave us with. Something that extends far beyond the glass walls of the Kronos 9.
I do. We have spent this time analyzing how a bespoke experimental train was turned into a murder weapon by a genius engineer.
Right.
But if an aerodynamic prodigy can turn a standard luxury train seat into a deadly, isolated vacuum using unseen micropressure waves, it forces us to look around our own lives.
At our own environment.
What other invisible physical forces in our hyper-engineered modern environments? From the pressurized cabins of the airplanes we commute in, to the massive, labyrinthine HVAC system circulating the air in our smart offices and high-rise apartments, could theoretically be turned against us by someone who simply understands the math better than we do.
That is a deeply uncomfortable question to take into the rest of the day. And on that note, I want to thank you for joining us on this intense deep dive into the Kronos 9 incident. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and perhaps take your headphones off for just a moment to let your ears adjust back to the real world.